moon blessings to all of our friends here at Son of a Witch. This is Michelle, your resident astrologer, and I just wanted to drop by with a little report on this full moon that's occurring today. The full pink moon occurs in the sign of Libra at approximately 2:54 Eastern Daylight Time, and it occurs not only on Saturn's day, but also within Saturn's hour. This lunation is intense and it's no nonsense. It's really urging us to be productive and honest in our relationships, including the relationship that we have within ourselves. The sun and moon, or the two lights in the sky, reflect truly our relationship to time. What is in the current moment and the deep, soulful reflections of our past as they're brought into the present through our mood and memory. The lunar influence and our changeable moods are typically felt most intensely 2 hours before and also 2 hours after Mother Moon reaches her full splendor. Be gentle with yourselves through this little snippet of time that lasts for about 4 hours in the middle of our day. Today, the Sun-Moon opposition joins with Pluto, and it forms a T-square. This vibrational pattern creates an energy flow of compulsive emotions. It's our deep internal emotional drive, and it may feel rather complex or even a bit stormy. The intensity may be a little difficult to properly process or even express to others, but truth and hidden agendas must be revealed or brought into the light of day. So let's break it down. That Aries sun, it really requires honesty and authenticity. Be unapologetically you. That Libra moon, it requires sharing energy and emotion as an equal with balanced respect. Pluto, it's a driving force. It's generally irrational. But in its current placement within Capricorn, it may feel a little more objective and detached at this point in time. The dwarf planets Haumea and Eris also join in to this little party in their conjunction to the moon and the sun, respectively. And while I won't go into too much about these two, it does quite simply denote a highlighted sense of self-reflection and assertiveness. So I challenge all of our listeners at this point in time to a few questions. Are you being honest within yourself? Or are you being honest in your relationships with others? Is there something that possibly you're hiding and can no longer keep tucked away? What is it that you need to discover? And are you holding on to something that just isn't there? And if so, it may be time to let go. I know that sounds harsh, and I do not mean for it to come across in that way by any means, but truth really is what does set us free. Saturn's hour on Saturn's day today when this occurs, it really couldn't be any more perfect for being in that space of quiet and deep contemplation as we feel our way through to what it is that will bring us into what will last for a lifetime or past eternity. There's some powerful midpoint structures occurring today, and these remind us that it's time to restructure if we are to love deeply, if we are to love passionately, and it also brings an inspired feeling and a sense of magic. Success really is ours for the taking when we focus on what is beautifully essential in our lives. Coordinate, plan, rearrange wherever you feel it is necessary. The beauty, the Neptune-Jupiter conjunction, it remains seeking something better on the other side of things. If you can hold that vision, explore, travel off to exotic places, even if it's only within the confines of your heart. Some other vibrational patterns repeat strongly in the 34th vibration or harmonic chart. This represents our interest in the stories of others, in our belief systems, and differing viewpoints that are shared quite intensely. And when we join with others, listen, truly listen, don't just hear, but try to put yourself in that space of stepping into the role of that other individual's life, just so that you can see and feel their point of view. And when we feel through what's being offered with empathy and compassion, there is a magic that takes place. When we step into the shoes of other people, it helps us to really gain a better view and an understanding. And we grow tremendously when we get down to the bare bone basics or the essentials. And by restructuring our responses and shifting that lens through which we view the stories and the experiences is really quite often necessary. There is a whole lot of truth in that we can truly be sweet and empathetic and brutally honest all at the same time. Grow through what you're going through and know beyond a shadow of a doubt that this divine energy process is not here to harm, but to heal. Truth sets us free, and Mother Moon truly does hold us close to her heart. Draw down her loving energy to embrace and soothe your soul. The eclipse season is underway, and these next 2 weeks are a prime time to release all that no longer serves us. Allow this impending solar eclipse to burn off any residual energy that is no longer needed. A little reminder, if you do full moon workings, it is a perfect evening to charge up those crystals, those magical items, to make that moon water. I personally do not work magic on a full moon, but do as you will. I'm sending you all off with many blessings, love, and peace to all. Blessed be, my friends.
I think it's like the difference between a meal, like going to get fast food, and a meal that you craft yourself, right?
Exactly.
Fast food will feed you. Fast food will get you through the day. Fast food will, and that, little meme about, candle colors, which I see all the time, this candle means this thing, you do this. Things are valuable. I think they're helpful. I think they introduce people to things, but it's not going to really have the richness, the depth, and nourishment. I would even say the nourishment, that something that you really work hard for has something really special, So
I agree with that. And that's what your candle magic book did. I mean, it went way beyond just, okay, well, this color works for this, and this day of the week is good for this. I mean, it went into it, but it went into it in such a way that it didn't just tell you how to dive deep and to really get detailed about every single aspect of this spell, but it also showed you how to kind of create your own.
Yeah, it's exactly what I wanted it.
It wasn't a book that was, here's how you do it, here's how I'm teaching you to do it, and at the end of it, I'm going to give you all these spells that I've come up with. I mean, it does that here and there, but it more or less teaches you how to craft your own, which
100%.
is not something really any books do.
Yeah, there's so many candle books out there, and they're great candle books out there. Don't get me wrong. I love, I love a Buckland candle book. But what a Buckland candle book is a recipe book. A recipe book you can make a meal out of a recipe, right? But it doesn't make you a chef. A chef can go into a kitchen, look in the fridge, pull this, that, and the other, and create a fantastic meal, right? So what I wanted to empower people to be able to do is to be able to create, because if you are reliant on recipes, you're always going to have to look for the recipe that most closely matches your intention. But intentions are unique. Spells are unique. They're, it's everybody's spell is going to be different, And so I transmitted like a brain dump of almost like saying like, this is how I do a spell. And by the way, I would say this is how I do a spell. There's many other ways to do a spell. I never say in my book, this is the one and only way. This is the Bible and you must follow my way or be damned or anything like that. It's like, there's a way that I learned to dress a candle, and you may dress a candle a different way. It's fine. You do it your way. It's totally fine. But I wanted to teach people how to A, create their own spells, and then B, the bonus is that you can look at someone else's spell and see what they're doing. So you can look at a Buckland spell and going, oh yeah, he's using a black and a white candle because he's trying to get balance, or he's working with light and shadow, or whatever, cleansing and clearing, banishing, whatever. You can discern what he's doing there, or anybody else's spell, and you can see what they're doing, and you can reconstruct it or do something different or adapt it. So my book is meant to turn you into a chef. It's not a recipe book. So like you said, there's a couple little recipes for examples here and there, but it's really teaching you how to craft and create a spell from scratch. And it meets you where you are. I've heard feedback from people who are like, oh my gosh, I'm a beginner. I've never done a candle spell. And this really walked me through it so that I felt confident. And I've heard from people who are experienced candle spell casters, and they're like, oh my God, I never thought of doing a layout. I never thought of using numerology in my spells, or this, that, or the other. So it takes you sort of from beginning to very, very advanced or complex. We'll say complex. So it meets you where you are, right? It meets you exactly where you are. And I really cover all the bases. And I just gave every piece of information that I had in my brain. There was not, as I said, mentioned before, there was nothing held back. There was nothing, like I was like, oh, I got to keep this secret because it's my special secret sauce. Nothing like that. Everything was out there for everyone, because that knowledge is power. We want people to be empowered. That's my goal. Empower the people.
I agree with that 100%. I'm an amateur coder. I like tech, stuff like that. And so it's funny here, you put it in a cooking analogy, but the way I had explained it to a friend of mine that I was recommending it to is, it's like, as you're looking at a program, you're basically getting a view of the code. Once you get that view of the code, then you can look at other people's spells, kind of like you mentioned, and see their code and change it as needed, or add to it, or whatever else.
100%.
That's one thing I really loved about it. So we've talked about Tarot Magic, your first book, a little bit. We've talked about Candle Magic, talked about your cabaret show, which I will definitely be trying to find. And so when did you eventually hit that point to where you were like, okay, it was Madame Pamita's Parlor of Wonders Cabaret, then it became Madame Pamita's Tarot Magic. Now I'm going to do Parlor of Wonders as an online presence.
That's that door opening, and now the key in the door thing. So being a tarot reader, I started doing the cabaret thing, and people would ask me to do parties. And so at that time, I was a high school librarian. That was my day job. And I was doing my music and my, tarot reading on the side. I would do parties for people. So I started really advertising that I was doing parties. And that's really what I thought my career was going to be. Oh, I'll just have a little side job doing parties, make a few, $100 here, $100 there, whatever. And it'll be fun. And, it wasn't something I pictured could be like a career. Little did I know that spirit was really leading me more and more and more to, here, open this door. Okay, step through it. Okay, here you go. So what happened was, I was a high school librarian. They eliminated my job and gave it to a minimum wage mom at the school, which is like, to me, kind of cuckoo. You don't give, it's like, you're going to have someone that doesn't know anything about run a library, but okay. But it felt like that tower card moment where it's like everything falls apart. And I really put my spirit, really my spiritual practice into high gear at that point. When I lost my job, I was a single mom. I was like, holy crap, what am I going to do? What's my plan? What am I going to do? And I had a freak out for 15 minutes and maybe 20 minutes. Let's be real. Okay. It was 20 minutes of freak out, crying, worried. Oh shit, what am I going to do? And then what happened was I said, no, let my spirituality kick into gear. This will work out for me. This moment will work out for me. And that was my spell. I was going to say, this horrific thing is going to open up something even better. So I said, what can I do? Okay, well, I'll collect unemployment and I'll just do tarot readings on the side, and till I figure out where my next library job is. That was my thought, I'll just figure out where my next library is where I'm going to land. And as soon as I started leaning into being a tarot reader, it was like, oh, every door opened. I went to my friends who were like managers at restaurants, like a vegan restaurant and a bookstore over here, and a Roma themed restaurant over here. And I was like, hey, you want a tarot reader to come in? And I'll just it won't cost you anything. And I'll just charge $5, $10, $15 for readings. I was like, that was back in the day. So I would come in once a week. So I had this little circuit of places that I would do once a week and add color to the restaurant and fun. And, it was like these real fun places, I don't know if you know Marcella Kroll, but Marcella Kroll was the reader at Stories Bookstore in LA. And then she left to go work somewhere else. And then I approached my friend. She's like, oh yeah, Marcella used to do readings here. Yeah, you can do readings here. She doesn't do them anymore. And so it was like, I had all this little circuit that I was doing. From there though, I knew I had this inner knowing, which is the thing that you really develop as a witch and in your spiritual practice, is that inner knowing of like that. What I would say is like your spirit's calling you, or your inner, just your inner knowing, right? That said, if you had an office and could do readings in an office where people had private space, you could charge more and you would do well. So I remember getting my first little office and the rent was $500 a month. And I'm like, oh, how am I ever going to come up with $500 a month? Oh my God. Oh my God. And the minute I put my shingle on the door, it was never a problem to make $500 a month. I'd make $500 in 2 days. I'd make fun, and then the rest of the month would be gravy. So I started just doing readings in a little office. From there, I said, oh, well, I want to have a big store and I want to have other readers. Well, it was like Goldilocks. I was too small and then I got too big. I got this beautiful big store. The rent was $5,000 a month. And that was like, oh my gosh, this is a vampire sucking the life out of me. So I did that for a year. And I was like, that's not going to work. So then I became an online store. And that's when I started manufacturing things. So before that time, when I had the big store, I was, buying things from other places and doing tarot readings and doing all that. But I started manufacturing my own candles. I had a candle maker at that time who was making beeswax candles. I wanted to work in beeswax because it's energetically amazing on so many levels and very magical and has lots of history. Greek history, we know, Rania knows. Yes. Beeswax is a real magical tool. And so I started making beeswax candles and then evolved and was doing online. And then I went into online hybrid where I had shared a space with a friend of mine. She had a bookstore. A little corner of that bookstore was my products, and then sell my products for me. And I had a space in the back where I would do the mail order and the manufacture and so on, and did that for 5 years in Highland Park, California. And then from there, I just was like, I need to have a factory space. I need a big factory. So we moved into a park and now we have a beautiful big factory. So that's that evolution. It was just always like seeing the door open in front of me and stepping into the door. In the meantime, way back when, Judika approached me. I had done a podcast. I started my podcast, which is one of my podcasts is Magic and the Law of Attraction. My new podcast, which I'm also doing, is called Baba Yaga's Magic, which is about Slavic magic. But my podcast, Magic and the Law of Attraction, and like the second or third episode, I did an episode about color magic. And in there, I quoted Judika and I said, because there's a part in her 5-book encyclopedia of 5,000 spells where she talks about making a color bath, that there are these bath bombs that exist that you can turn your bath water a color. And I was fascinated with the idea of doing a bath. I'm a Cancer, so water is my jam, and doing a bath in color so that you could imbue that water with that energy of green for growth, prosperity, fertility, or yellow for success, or, whatever your color correspondences are. Right. So I contacted Judika and I said, hey, Judika, I check out episode 3. I talk about on, minute mark, wherever I talk about you and the color magic spell. And she's like, what are you writing right now? I said, well, I'm working on making a program for love magic or this or that or whatever I was doing. She's like, why aren't you writing a book? Are you publishing it or is someone else publishing it? I'm like, I'm publishing it. Who else? Who'd want to publish me? So she's like, hey, you want to write a book for Wiser? I'm like, yeah. So then I gave him a book proposal for the tarot book that I wanted to be out there in the world. I wanted there to be a tarot book that looked at it in terms of working with synchronicities, looking very, very deeply at the Rider-Waite-Smith, which is my deck that I first got with Lori Cabot way back when, which is Rider-Waite-Smith. And so looking at these old friends of mine in really deep ways of looking at individual symbols in those cards, also looking at those cards as tools for affirmations, which are spells. Affirmations are spells, right? How you can use the cards in other ways. So I teach how you can use them as a divination tool, but you can also use them as a projection tool. You can go in and pull the card of what it is that you want, put that on your altar and say, I want health and happiness. So I'm going to put the sun card on my altar, or I want to end this shitty situation once and for all. So I'm going to put the 10 of swords on my altar. So you can use the cards in ways magically, and it's kind of a free-form book, just like the candle magic book. It's like, here, I'll give you some examples, but you do it. You got to figure it out. You got to make the connection. So you can make magic with a tarot deck, but I'm not going to give you a bunch of spells. Like, I'm not going to say this is the spell for da 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 da. Here's an affirmation you can use, but make your own affirmation. Here's a question you can use in your journal. Journal about this card if you want to get to really intimately know this card. Here's a prompt, a journal prompt that you can write about that will connect you deeply to that card. So that's why that book came out, was because I wanted there to be this book that looked at the cards in ways that were expansive. I look at cards in a realistic way. And I also look at cards in a way that you can see the blessing in a card like the Tower. Going back, rewind, 5 minutes, the blessing of me losing my job. If I had not lost my library job, I'd still be a librarian doing parties on the side. Maybe I'd be doing something else. Who knows? But you know what I'm saying? The Tower moment actually brought a blessing. I think, as horrific, and like, look at things like a Tower moment is happening for Ukraine right now, a horrific Tower moment. But even if we dig through that rubble, we can find a treasure. The treasure is people are aware of Ukraine now. People didn't even know where Ukraine was. I mean, I did, but nobody else did. People were like, you're Ukrainian. Does that mean you're Russian? It's the Ukraine, right? It's Russian. I'm like, no, it's its own culture. So this has brought a beautiful awareness of this gorgeous culture. So that is the golden nugget in that rubble that we're finding in this. And it's not to say that, we had to lose lives or people had to be terrorized to do this, but there is a blessing in every tower. There's a that's what those yods are that are falling down. Those little flames that are falling down in the Tower card are blessings. It's a hidden message in that card. So I was looking at the cards in a way of seeing the possibilities and the hidden messages that are there, instead of just looking at the Tower with like, oh my God, something horrible is going to happen. Okay.
That's what I love about the book. It literally gives you more meaning instead of that stereotypical, oh, it's a bad card or someone getting overwhelmed by it. It gives you that other meaning that can actually bring, like you said, the blessings.
It doesn't have to. And my tarot card book is not the be all end all. It's just another view. That's the beautiful thing about tarot. I teach tarot and I tell students, I go, your interpretation of a card is as valid as any book out there. Because if you look at the book, look at 9 tarot books, 10 tarot books, 12, 20 tarot books, and look at what they say about the 9 of Wands. Not one of them is going to say the same thing about that card. Not one. So that tells you that there's no authority on tarot. So you get to be the authority. Mike, your interpretation of that card is as valid as anyone else's. So you don't have to memorize. You don't have to memorize a card.
Well, and that's how I do most of mine. Most of mine is intuitive. Obviously I kind of in the back of my head know the general gist of what they say it's supposed to be, but I don't really, that's why I do it as much, because most of my work like that, in that vein, so intuitive that I think that was what held me back at one point was, okay, well, I have to learn all these meanings, and this is what this card means, and this is what this card means, and how am I supposed to remember all this in a reading instead of just doing what felt right for that particular client at the time? So
exactly. That's what I struggled with as a teen. 10-year-old, and forget it. I got into teenage times. How was I doing readings? I was doing a layout, doing a Celtic cross or whatever layout. And then I would look up each one in the book and we would go along that way. When we were teenagers, that's how we read. And I had that belief that you had to memorize it. And every fall, it was without fail. Fall was the time that I was going to do. This was the year I was going to conquer and memorize all those cards. And I'd get about as far as maybe the Emperor, or maybe I'd get as far as the Wheel of Fortune, and then I'd go, what did the Fool card mean again? You know what I mean? I was just like, it's like, I'm not a memorizer person, and you don't have to be a memorizer person. It's what I find books great for, and Rania would probably agree with me, is that it's like having a conversation with someone else about a thing that you both love, a piece of art. If you look at a piece of art, ooh, I love the colors that they use. And the other person says, ooh, that beautiful way that they rendered that light in the picture or whatever. You have different views on the same thing that you're looking at, but can they coexist? 100%, 100%. So I look at other tarot books and I'm like, oh, I like what they say about that card. I'm going to add that to my knowledge of that card. Or I look at something and go, that doesn't resonate for me. That's okay. My stuff, it doesn't have to resonate with anybody either. It can or cannot, but it's another option that's out there for you to learn and embrace the cards and maybe see a detail that you haven't seen before. This is my I have to say, this is like my proudest moment. Judica Illis, who has been a tarot reader and a magic practitioner, a witch for and a writer, an authority, a researcher. She says, what's your favorite deck? I said Rider-Waite-Smith. It's my old friends. That's the one I always lean on because it's my old friends, right? I love that deck too. It's a rich, very rich deck for me. It always teaches me new things, shows me new things. Even after 40 something years of being around that deck, I'm still seeing things. That's what she said. She said, with your book, you pointed out things in your book that I had never noticed about the card. And she had been around the decks as long as I had been. And that to me was like my proudest moment, that I was able to, even someone who's like Rania, who's very experienced, or Judica, who's very experienced, can look at that book and go, I never noticed that little guard that's walking away in the Six of Cups, or I never noticed the squiggly line that's on the sun that's like kind of off kilter or whatever, like this weird little details that enrich your understanding of that particular deck. But it can apply to any deck, really. You just look at the cards, and then you'll start to see and learn, and they never get boring for me.
I went through several tarot decks before I have Rider-Waite-Smith, and I had Gilded something, and finally landed on the Crow Tarot, which crows are my thing. Crows are my thing. Well, I told Rania, sadly, it was in my book bag in my car, and I didn't realize in the back of my car there was a leak in my window apparently, and it leaked right into it and soaked my deck, and I was just heartbroken. I was like, oh my gosh. And so now I can't even bring myself to buy another one. But so I know what you mean about how you connect.
Mike, you're gonna have to give me your address.
Oh,
you're gonna have to give me your address, and I'll send you my Crow Tarot. I have two. So I'll send you one. I wondered why I had two. It's because Mike's supposed to have one.
But yeah, so I that's awesome. Thank you. I know what you mean by connecting with a deck, even for someone like me who is just a novice. I very readily call myself a novice. But yeah, and in your book there were things like you said, you took a deep dive, but yeah, and so I guess we could just keep this going forever, but I know you have a busy schedule. I won't keep you too long, but thing that I really, I was super interested because we haven't ever had a chance to just chat like this and kind of let me pick your brain and kind of get into your backstory and everything else. But Baba Yaga, that is, I love her. I have done, and I'll have to chat with you off camera about this, but there's a meditation, and you may know the one I'm talking about, but it's a very, very visual meditation where you go to her house in the woods and you have tea with her. And when I did that, that's when I did the episode about Baba Yaga right after that, because I was like, wow, this is just, I had always thought of her as this scary, and not that she's can't be, but this scary, overbearing, just person. And when I came out of that meditation, I was like, well, she can be that, but it also felt very comforting and nurturing as well. So I would love to kind of, I know because of your heritage and everything else, that's one part of it, but I would love to know what kind of drew you to her and ultimately led to this book, because I cannot wait to. I was so jealous yesterday on Instagram. Somebody was like, look, I just got my copy, and I'm like, I hate you. Not really, but I do.
Well, next book, I'll hit you up for a blurb, and then you get your advanced copy earlier than everyone else when you write a blurb. So that's how you get the copy before everyone else. Well, I can tell you, Mike, that you have had an authentic encounter with Baba Yaga, because if you what you're describing is exactly her. She is ambiguous, meaning that she's not all love and light,
Yeah.
but she's not all danger either. We could spend 2 hours talking about Baba Yaga, but I will be as short as I can. So she goes back because she's pan-Slavic, and we actually find correspondences with her in other cultures. So we think that there were other streams of information, or let's say variations of her. Hecate. I said it right.
You said it right.
Rania taught me how to say it right. Is like there's a lot of overlap between Hecate and Baba Yaga. A lot of overlap.
They're very
working
similar.
at the crossroads, she's she can be a crone figure. She can be this. There's so many ways. I grew up with Baba Yaga stories. This is part of my culture. This was very familiar to me. And I thought everybody knew about her. And I was shocked to find out that people don't know about her. I'm like, what? This
Not
is like
that
the
many.
most famous. Yeah, this is. So when I
Not a
talk to
lot.
people who don't know about her, I say, well, she's a little bit like, she shows up in many stories, and she can sometimes be like the witch in Hansel and Gretel, which people in America are familiar with that story. She can sometimes be like Rumpelstiltskin testing you. She can show up in all these ways. But we do know this, that when Christianity came in to Slavic countries, Slavic lands, to Kiev in 988 AD, what happens when Christianity comes in? And we see this all over the place. We look at the old pagan culture and we go, oh, we like that thing and you guys like that thing. So we're going to turn that person and that spirit into a saint, right? So now we have Saint Bridget, we have Saint Paraskeva, we have all these saints that were once spirits or deities, right? That's one thing. Now, if we have one that we really don't like, or we can't sort of combine it with Christianity, we're going to turn it into a devil or an ogre or a demon. And that's what happened to Baba Yaga. So Baba Yaga is really, we can see because of ethnographers who have looked, they will say with authority that her story has existed for thousands of years. She's the forest grandmother. She's the keeper of the forest, right? So imagine living in a time where you lived up against a forest, and forest would be beautiful. It would provide your food, your shelter, your wood, your berries, your animals, everything it would provide for you. But it was also dangerous as well. And that's how Baba Yaga is. If you approach with respect, you're going to get a boon. If you disrespect or act cocky or arrogant, she's going to punish you. And so you don't approach her with arrogance. Don't approach her with like, oh, I know. You go with humility. Now in Slavic magic and in many old magical practices, but in particular in Slavic magic practice, it's very quid pro quo. You make an offering to a spirit so that you get you honor the spirit, or make an offering so that you get the blessing of that spirit. You never demand or control a spirit or tell them what they're going to do. You make an offering and ask, right? And so with Baba Yaga, you would make an offering of some sort into the forest and say, protect me or watch over me and so on. Well, we have this ambiguous spirit. Christianity is going to say, oh, she's an ogre. So we can look at stories and see if they're coming from the Christian point of view or they're coming from the pagan point of view about her. In the Christian point of view, she's going to be the ogre that throws the kid in the fire. The fire, however, if we look at that, like throws the kid into the oven was the home of the spirits. I bet you in Greek magic too, there's fire spirits and fire magic, where the oven is the ancestor home, the home of the ancestors. So she is the initiator and the gatekeeper, like Hecate. She's the initiator into the world of the dead. She's in the world of the spirits. So she's that, but she's also an initiator spirit. She tests you. So as we look at the older stories, it's like more like Rumpelstiltskin. Hey, you need to turn this weave or more like the king in the Rumpelstiltskin story. You need to weave this wool into gold. You need to spin this into gold. You need to separate these seeds. We see these stories where there's impossible tasks that are given to the hero or the heroine, and they have to perform the impossible task. And then there's a blessing from her. She gives a gift at the end. She might give you a magical tool, a magical ball of yarn that leads you to your destination, or she gives you the directions to get to a magical place that you need to go. So this is how we see the older version of her and the new propaganda version of her. But the older version of her is she is an initiator. So she's an elder. She's a powerful witch. She's a crone. She's challenging, and she's there to initiate you deeper into your practice, into your spirituality, and give you boons, give you blessings, give you treasure. So you have to go, you have to do the test. And I will tell you that in 3D reality, let's call it that, when you work with her, you're going to cry. I'm just going to warn you. Like when people say, oh, I really want to work with Baba Yaga, I'm like, okay, slow your roll for a second. Are you prepared to have somebody push you harder than you ever thought you could go, to cry and say, I don't want to do this, and be challenged in some way, but then receive the blessing in the end? It's like climbing to the top of a high mountain. It's going to be painful. It's going to be hard. You're going to want to give up. But if you don't give up, you will get the treasure. You will get to the top of the mountain.
It's rewarding.
Yeah, exactly. And she will do that for you, because I will tell you, this book, many times I was like, screw this book. I don't want to do it. I'm tired of researching. I'm tired of coming to dead ends. I feel lost. I feel overwhelmed. I feel like I can't do this anymore. And then I would regroup, and then I would go back to do it. I felt called to do it. I couldn't not do it. I had to do it, but I felt many times like I wanted to give up, and I cried many times. I cried many, many times, but that's what she does for you. I liken her. I said this to Pam Grossman the other day. I said, she's like an Olympic coach who says, Rania, you're a gymnast. We're going to get you to the Olympics.
Exactly.
And you got to do this thing. And you're like, I can't jump over a 10-foot pole. Yes, you can. You can do it. She believes in you.
Your limits.
Yeah. She believes in you more than you believe in you. But if you listen to her, if you trust her, if you listen to what I'm getting chills right now. If you listen to her and you trust her, and you follow what she is leading you to, guess what the biggest treasure is? You discovered something in yourself that you never knew you could do. You discover in yourself an amazing treasure.
Amazing.
So you probably can't even see this, but
I can see it.
Like,
Yeah.
Because you talking about that last year, and I haven't even had a chance to dive into this with Rania yet, and we talk all the time, but last year, right before everything happened, I had done that meditation with Baba Yaga. In that meditation, and I'll not on the recording, but I'll tell both of you privately, but it was very personal, but she, and it was like you said, I went into it knowing, it wasn't like anybody told me this, but I went into it as soon as I was there, and it was very real. I knew that this is somebody to be revered and respected. And, I went into it as humble as I could possibly go. And I still remember the inside of the house and sitting down by the fire, and her asking if I wanted tea and telling me to drink it, not asking me, but telling me. And she basically told me, because I asked her at that point, and I came out of it crying, which is why I think I've got goosebumps right now. But I asked her at that point if there was any way that she would ever consider teaching me or working with me or letting me work with her. And she told me that you are going to have a very hard trial ahead of you. And we will more or less, I'm paraphrasing, but we'll reconvene after that's done, because that was going to bring an awareness that I needed. Getting a little emotional talking about it, but right after that, I am not going to cry when I tell you all this. Right after that, I recorded the Baba Yaga episode. I was recording the one, I think, right after that. In the middle of recording, I got a call that my stepmom, since I'd been 8, had suddenly passed unexpectedly. Just 65 years old, she was gone. And so I stopped the recording. I had no clue how I was going to fly back. This is at the beginning of COVID. How I was going to afford it and everything else. A listener, I ended up going into that same meditation again, asking for help. Came out like an hour later, I got $500 wired to me from a listener. I went down there, I did that. My mom, who was really good friends with my stepmom, crazy story, she couldn't make it to the funeral because she wasn't feeling well. Well, after I got home, she went into CCU with COVID, spent 4 weeks in COVID, CCU, nobody could see her, and then she passed at 65. a month later. And so I went back down south for that, came back, and this one wasn't as unexpected, but my grandmother had been in hospice, and this is the one that taught me what I know and everything. And literally 4 weeks to the day later, she passed. And before the stepmom, about 6 months before that, my granddad had passed. So, I mean, it was just like a tower year. I mean, hands down, no doubt about it, a tower year. And there were a lot of other things. I had to move from New England, which I wasn't really happy about. And I now see why I moved to the beach. But
yeah, I would say too, that she's holding your hand as you go through this. She, saw this coming and was as the psychopomp who carries the, spirits into the afterlife. She's like, I'm here at the gate. I'm watching over them. I'm with them, whether they see her or not, that you have this spirit who moves between the lower world and the upper world, and then the land of the spirits and the land of the living. And so you have this deity who's beside you, and Poseidon, I wouldn't consider him, I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I wouldn't look at him as like he's dealing with the afterlife and the lower world and all of those things. He's dealing with water and power of water and all of that. So you needed to have a spirit that's with you in this experience, who understands this experience intimately, so that you would not, that you could, that I would say, could help you during this time. She's there with you in this time, not to, it's not her that's causing this. This is a fact of life, is that we all go and we all experience grief. If you don't experience grief, it means you're the first to go, right? Which is not what we want, right? So, she's there to hold your hand and to be a source of strength for you as you deal with life and death. And I would say for me, she came to the forward part of my life after I got a richer understanding with her after losing my mom and my dad. And recently my brother passed away from COVID. Losing these people, she has been there for me in a way that has eased it, or you didn't feel alone in your grief. That's how I felt. So
in a Harry Potter analogy, you're saying she's like a Thestral. You really get close to her when you've experienced death and stuff.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah. I mean, I think you know her in a different way after you've experienced loss. And it doesn't have to necessarily be death. It can be loss, it can be loss of your home, or loss of, in that case, you had lots of loss, because it was not only the loss of these beautiful mother figures in your life, but you lost your home, you lost your love, you lost your pets, you lost a lot. You had a lot of grief. And so that's just one aspect of her. I don't think that's her only face, but to be there for you when you're going through grief is one of her ways of being. She's also there as an icon of age and power and age. How many icons do we, we don't have that many icons of spirits or people or things that are powerful as age. Especially in American culture, it's the worst. We revere youth. You have to look eternally young. You have to be youthful. You have to But it's like, you can actually embrace age and see age as power. That's a very old way of looking, because the elders of the old systems, the elders were looked up to. This topsy-turvy where we worship youth is off.
And still should be.
That's what we're bringing back. Exactly. Witches are bringing that back. Who is bringing that back? Witches, right? Yeah. You look at your, at Lori as this, you revere her, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, definitely.
Right? Reverend Mother, you revere her. She's this, and it's her age and her longevity and her wisdom that she's accrued through those many, many years. That is and the wisdom that she shared in her stories, and all of that has really been what has made her more powerful. So the beautiful thing about witchcraft is, the older you are, it is true, the more powerful you are. The longer you do something, the more experience you have, the more wisdom you have.
More wisdom.
Yeah. So
you never stop learning.
Exactly.
You're never going to learn it all. And that's one thing like I say, I want to know all the things. And theology has always been, before I even got really strong as like, this is my path. When I was a teenager, are searching and seeking. And so I decided I was going to learn about any and every religion I could get my hands on. And I was going to learn as much as I possibly could to make an informed decision. And I did, and I still do. I still find religions that, I learn things about, but it helped me gain a broader scope of what witchcraft is, can be, and does. And it also allows me, when I get into a conversation with people, this is why I tell everybody that listens to this show, the history of witchcraft is invaluable. You can't, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, you can't be a true at heart witch if you're not interested in learning about the history of it. I'll just go on record and say that. And I also think that you have to know that you're going to be learning for the rest of your life. You can't
100%.
go into anything thinking, well, don't, like, I know I've done a lot of candle magic over the past 30 years, but I would never come into a conversation and be like, you're not going to teach me anything I don't already know, because I've learned things just in this conversation. So I think that's amazing. And kind of circling back to Baba Yaga, I think what it did for me is, I think she, like you said, foresaw that I was losing every mother figure I'd ever had. And I think that, at least for me, I don't know if she intended it to be this way, but she has kind of filled that void in a way.
I'd say she did intend it.
as
I don't think
mother,
she does anything by accident.
I've definitely started working with her much more since then. And now that it's kind of like we talked about earlier, in the early days that you and I remember, Rania being the baby, she's, but
she's got it handed to her on a silver platter.
Exactly. Like my son said, Dad, what was the internet like when you were my age? There was no internet. You're grounded. But yeah, it was almost like that, learning about her. And then I'm like, okay, well, not many people, like you touched on, know about her in Western culture. And the ones that do may know a little bit, but not in depth. That's why when this book was announced, I was like, oh, now I could get some more knowledge and glean some more information about this person that I've started working with. And then, now you come into the picture. So don't think that I'm not going to be messaging you, asking you stuff.
You can ask me questions all day long. I love it. I mean, I will love talking about Baba Yaga forever. I mean, she's such a beautiful mystery that I say, I think you guys would agree. The more you learn, the more you realize how much you don't know, like Absolutely. People who know it all know nothing.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like the longer you study magic, you're like, oh my God, it's like, it's branches. It's like when you step into that, it's like a tree and there's branches and you go, oh my gosh, there's so many, branches where it can go. Can I go off in this direction? Can I go off? There's so much that you don't know. So you choose your path, you choose your own adventure. That was your internet back in the day. Choose your own adventure books, right? You choose your own adventure and you go on this path, but you realize as you go on this path, you start to see connections with other paths and connections with other cultures. And you start to see these other links and things. It becomes a little bit like those bulletin boards they have in crime movies where they have the strings leading all the pictures and the strings leading everywhere. It becomes like that. So you realize how much you don't know the more you know. So when someone says, I am the authority, I know everything about this one, I always go like, okay, all right. It's that humility that you have to come with to meet Baba Yaga is to say, I know nothing. I come on my own free will. And I really come to sit at your feet and to learn. And when you come with that, it's like a respect for your elders, respect for your grandparents. It's that openness that is the biggest gift of all, because that's when she can give you the cup of tea. That's when you can sit by the fire and she will tell you the stories. That's when she can come through you. Mm-hmm. It's going to come from that. Absolutely. Absolutely. So good.
So what, having said all that, what brought on the book? Like, I guess, what made you put all this down? I mean, how did you know, okay, well, I want it to say this, or I want to impart this to people, that sort of thing.
I'm rolling my eyes because I'm like, oh my gosh, that process, remembering the pain of that process. You're bringing me back. It's like childbirth. You're bringing me back to like, oh my gosh, remember when I was, give me all the drugs. Give me all the drugs. I don't care. Get this baby out of me. So she called me, spirits. I'm a spiritualist. And it's a very interesting, deities, I work with a little bit, but I'm not really a deity person. I'm more of a spirit person. And so spirits are very intimate. I think of deities. I mean, your experience with deities may be very intimate, but my experience with deities is often they're very up there or down there or far away. And we have some distant communication, but it doesn't seem intimate. But spirits to me are very intimate. So spirits will call me to do things, and spirits will it's like they find somebody picking up the phone, right? So they call me and they say, I need you to do this. I'm like, okay. So even spirits I'm not a devotee of, like, for example, Santa Muerte, not a devotee of Santa Muerte. She's not of my culture, but she's like, you need to make a Santa Muerte candle because there are people that are connected to me that need this candle. And I'm like, okay. Or Black Hawk. Black Hawk is Mother Leafy Anderson was a black spiritualist in the 1920s. And her spirit was this war chief, Black Hawk. And so he's like, you need to make me a candle. I'm like, I'm not Native American. He's like, make the candle. And then that whole Keystone Pipeline thing happened, and the protests and the injustice and the Black Lives Matter and all these things happened where he needed to be there, and that candle needed to be there for people to work with for social justice. So spirits will come to me and say, I need you to do this errand for me. And I'm like, okay. It doesn't mean I'm a devotee. It doesn't mean I just do it for them because they ask and I can, right? Baba Yaga came to me and says, you need to write this book. You need to write about Slavic magic. You need to share these practices, and you need to write about me. And I'm like, okay. And so I did a ton of research and oh my gosh, I did a ton of research. And then I put together the book. And I was like, when I initially put together the book, I had one chapter about Baba Yaga and the stories of Baba Yaga. And then I had a chapter about this magic and a chapter about that magic. And I'm like, as I was planning it out, I'm like, how can I fit Baba Yaga into one chapter? I can't fit her into one chapter. People need to have an intimate experience of her, or really have an experience with her to understand her. So then that divine muse download, that you get when you're working, and then something happens, which I think of as you're channeling your muse or you're channeling your spirits. It's a channel. Said, she's a fairy. Her story has been carried in fairy tales. Make a fairy tale in the story that includes her in it, so that people can get an intimate feeling for her. And then let her speak about these topics that show up in the fairy tale, so that she can tell you her version of it. And then you, Pam, you can talk about the magic. I'm like, okay. Mm-hmm. So then that became the structure of the book. So in each chapter, the chapter starts out with an episode of a fairy tale. Now, what I've done is I've really taken many of her stories and sort of cherry picked the pieces that had magic that related to real magical practices, and incorporated that into the story. So there's stories about spirits. I mean, there's things about spirits. There's things about weaving. There's things about food. There's things about having an altar in your home. I mean, all these things are woven in. So in each episode, it introduces something. So for example, there's an episode where the little girl, Vasilina, she's looking for Baba Yaga, and she comes to a crossroads, and she has a little experience at the crossroads. And then Baba Yaga teaches about the crossroads and crossroads magic. And then I come in and say, okay, here are some Ukrainian practices that you can do. This is how you do it in modern day. We don't live in most of us don't live in rural areas. So this is how you work with crossroads magic in 21st century, right? So that became the format of the book, but that was channeled. That was totally channeled. The whole thing was channeled. It was my grandmother pushing me, my grandmother's spirit going, come on, girl, you are the granddaughter of I would say a Voroshka or a Baba Sheptucha. You are a granddaughter. You need to take on this mantle and do this work. I'm like, okay, taking on that, teaching about this, sharing my beautiful culture. And then weirdly, the book comes out when everyone's aware of Ukraine. Like, that, I'm telling you, is that evidence of the spirits talking to you. that I didn't wait 2 years to do the book, that I didn't wait 6 years to do the book, that I did the book when she called me to do it. I'm like, okay. And now the book's coming out when everyone's very aware of Ukraine and Slavic culture. And this is like, hello.
That didn't go unnoticed on me, by the way. That's coming out right around this.
This divine timing happens to me like more times than not, where I'm like Forrest Gump, like I'm at the right place at the right time. Like, what the heck? It's because you listen to your spirits, you listen to your inner knowing. When you start working in that way, things flow for you in such shockingly remarkable ways that it's like delightful surprises everywhere. Not that I want there to be, the awareness of Ukraine at the loss of lives. That's not what I'm saying. But the fact that, this thing, if we understand that you're on this timeline, and that the spirit knows what's coming, the spirit will be urgent about like, hey, in 2 years' time, there's going to be this horrific thing happening. I need you to do this now so that in 2 years' time it comes out,
Yeah, that's true. That's powerful.
It is.
Because right now, like you said, I mean, once this is available to everybody, people are going to want to do that. And
this is the whole situation with Ukraine, that we have had diaspora after diaspora after diaspora because of because of war, basically. If you look at Ukrainian history, it's people standing strong and staying there, but other people going, I have to have peace in my life. I have to go live somewhere else. And so my grandparents were diaspora Ukrainians. I'm a diaspora Ukrainian, descendant of diaspora Ukrainians. I call myself a diaspora Ukrainian because if it weren't for that war that happened in the early 20th century, I would still be there. I would have been, my dad would have been a different dad. My mom, would have, because both my grandparents were there in the same village. My mom would have been there, but I would have been a different person, whatever, but I would have been there. Right. So this forced expulsion of people and really bringing awareness about things that people don't understand, like, as I mentioned before, people think Ukraine is Russia, or they think it's part of Russia because that was Russian propaganda all through the 20th century. This is just another state of Russia. But understanding, if you learn history about it, actually Ukraine, that area, Kiev was the center, which is, the capital of Ukraine, was the center of culture. Moscow, St. Petersburg were dirt hills. They were nothing. So it was this area. This is why Putin is so intent on taking Kiev. It's not just a strategic move. It is a voracious trying to destroy Ukrainian culture and claim Kiev as Russian. And Ukrainians know this and Russians know this, but nobody outside of that. Maybe some people know, but this is a strategic move because this is the heart of the Eastern Slavic culture, is Kiev. Culture. Yeah. So he wants to have that as a strategic thing to say, look at my glorious empire that I created. And really, I feel like he is dealing with some terminal illness of some kind, but he really has this urgency to establish himself as like this glorious leader who brought back glory to Russia by conquering and destroying a culture. That's his Hitlerian plan. And so there's something deeper than just like, oh, I want to take over this land. It's a spiritual conquest because he wants to claim Ukrainian culture as Russian culture. And it's not. The thing that a lot of Western people understand is how England imposed English and wiped out Irish culture, Scottish culture, and Welsh culture, and in the name of unification, forced people to speak English. They couldn't speak Welsh. They didn't teach Welsh, for example, or Scots or Irish or Gaelic in schools. They had to learn English in schools because we're going to unify you. It's colonization. It's taking your culture and trying to wipe out a culture. And so I'm not saying that English people are bad, but English systems, the imperial system is bad. So I'm not, I'm part English myself. So I'm not gonna, it's not that I'm saying, but I'm saying that this imperialism where we wipe out a culture, wipe out a language, wipe out these things. It's happened in North America. It happened in America. We take Native Americans. We're like, you have to speak English. We're going to move you from your land and we're going to put you someplace else and we're going to destroy your culture. But thank the gods that people hang on to culture. So in Ukraine, as everybody left, they took their culture with them. The total miracle in all of this is that during Soviet Union times, all of this stuff was being completely repressed and destroyed in Ukraine. But it was like the people who escaped and got out were able to keep that culture going. So the diaspora Ukrainians were doing pesanki when in Ukraine they weren't allowed to make the magical eggs. But in America and in Canada and Australia and these other places, people kept that practice going. People kept the practice, the religious practices going. So it was because people were away from it. It was like, I always say, it's like a bug preserved in amber. We were able to preserve these things. And then when, Ukrainian independence happened 30 years ago, it was like this flowering of the old culture where people were bringing back the old practices and bringing back these things that they had been so fearful or forgotten in some cases, because 80 years, that's 3 generations right there. So we were able to reintegrate those practices back together. So, native Ukrainians will never look at a diaspora Ukrainian and go, oh, you're not real Ukrainian. They value the diaspora Ukrainians. That's why Zelensky is saying diaspora Ukrainians get activated right now, because we carried that culture when we couldn't be on our land. We were able to carry that culture for the people that were there that were being oppressed, Now, The one exception to that is there's an ethnic group, there's an ethnic group, I'm not diminishing it, up in the mountains, the Hutzels. They were so remote and so distant and so of no interest, because the land was mountainous land. It isn't interesting land. And they were so sort of isolated that they were able to keep these practices going, because the Soviets weren't. It's very Western. It's really on the Western border and way, way up high. They were like, whatever, you do whatever. So they were sort of able to keep a continuity when the rest of Ukraine was not able to keep a continuity. And then the diaspora Ukrainians were able to keep the continuity as well. So then when the independence movement happened, we have brought it all back. People wearing embroidered blouses, talismanic embroidered blouses, Vishivanki. There's a Vishivanka day, and all of that, wearing these beautiful embroidered magical embroideries, which have meaning. Each of those, patterns has a meaning. So you as the sewer, you can get into some stitchery maybe too, Mike. That's awesome. It's magical, it's I cool.
I love that kind of stuff. Incorporating it into it. So yeah, it sounds like your book, and that's kind of what I wanted to find out if you felt the same way, because I went into this thinking that at first, I was just like, oh, Baba Yaga, it's a book about Baba Yaga magic. That's awesome. I want to learn about Ukrainian magic. And then when everything started happening, I'm like, there was a reason for the book. So yeah, it kind of all came full circle, and I applaud you for doing it, because I think it will help tons of people find peace, if nothing else. They have been empowered to be able to make change for themselves. And
books are important. Books are so important, because this is the story. We were talking, Rania and I were talking earlier. I said, thank the gods for Greece, because Greece had written language and recorded so much about the lands that they traveled to, about their own spiritual practices and so on. It's a tragedy about the Library of Alexandria, being destroyed because so much knowledge was lost with that. But that shows you the importance of written word for the Druids and the Celts, and for the Celts which existed in Central Europe. Of course, we know that the Celts came from Central Europe. These practices were oral traditions. And when the priests die, the tradition dies. So we only have our information about Druidic practice from the view of the other, the person who's outside and judging it and looking at it. But we can piece together things a little bit from that. But I say, what a beautiful blessing it was that in Greek, there's been continuity in Greece all throughout history, and that information we have goes back thousands of years, and that Greeks were explorers and going out and finding things and looking at things that and writing about these things.
Writing about them.
Yeah, so that we have that continuity of some kind. So the books and the written part of this is important. That my book gets translated into Ukrainian is my complete deepest wish, and I feel like it's going to happen, because I'm intending it so strongly. But to have that book translated, it requires a Ukrainian publisher or somebody willing to translate it into Ukrainian. So that's what has to happen, is that it gets translated into Ukrainian. My other book, the Candle Magic book, got translated into a bunch of languages, but already the Baba Yaga book, I've been approached by a few people. One in wanting to translate it into Polish, another one wanting to translate it into French. So we have a lot of interest from other publishers, and we just need a publisher in Ukraine or a Ukrainian speaking publisher that's willing to translate it and turn it into a book in Ukrainian. And then it would be amazing to have that over there in that way, to sort of share this information, which is pretty well known, but I don't know that everybody realizes how old the practices are and how they show up in pagan practice. That eggs, for example, most common people will say they're Easter egg. They don't know necessarily that they go back to 5,000 years to Trypillian culture necessarily. They might know, scholars will know, people that study it will know, but average person may not know. And so having these practices documented, there's very few books, even in Ukrainian, about Ukrainian practices. I had to go into a lot of like doctoral theses and ethnographer, papers and all kinds of things in English and in Ukrainian to find so much of this information. If you look at the bibliography, it's probably 60 or 70% Ukrainian language stuff that I had to go into. So,
wow.
So that was when I was crying.
Yeah.
Just a little hot tip. I'm like, oh my gosh, so hard to find this information. So
we'll see. And
you did.
And you did. Yeah. I think part of it was your drive and determination, but the other part was you were being driven spiritually to do these things. So obstacles were likely being removed as needed to assist in that. So
my gosh,
an amazing story.
Thank technology and thank Google Translate. That helped a lot. I really gave my Google Translate a workout.
Ukraine on there now, because I don't think I've seen a listener from there. So yeah, we'll work on that.
We'll get one for sure with this episode. For sure.
I'll on my end too, I'll help to translate it into Ukraine. I'll do some work on my end too, because I think that would be amazing. It would be a huge help for the people there. And my gosh, we have kept so much of your time. I didn't even get to the eggs, which would be another deep dive in and of itself. So I would love some point in the future, not too far, hopefully, to have you back on just to do an episode on Ukrainian magic. Like, I think people would love, we've touched on it here and there, but I think it would be awesome. So
I'd love that. I would love that. I'm down for any time. Just let me know.
Yeah, definitely. And I am I just want to keep talking to you, but we need to wrap things up, I guess, or I will never get this edited. But thank you for coming on. It was such a joy to have you on the show and to finally, like you say, you and I have kind of conversed in messages back and forth for a while, but to be able to have a conversation with you is amazing. You're a dear, and we are really honored to have you on. So having said that, I will say that if you haven't picked up Madame Pamita's Tarot Magic or
Yaga's Book of Witchcraft, this is, I got my first copy of it.
That's
yesterday,
right. I knew it had something about Slavic in it too. So it's beautiful.
Isn't it? It's such a big, it's way bigger than I thought. It's a big book.
I like books that size though. I don't like them when they're really tiny.
It's not a wimpy book. Oh my gosh. This is, Yaga Sarah is her name on Instagram and everywhere. She's a tattoo artist, and these are all drawn by hand. These are not like digital drawings or anything like that. She draws these by hand. She's a tattoo artist in England, but she's Slovenian.
Wow.
So she knew. It was really interesting in the whole process. You don't get, the book publisher will ask if you have a artist you want to work with, or they'll match you with someone. And I always kind of trust and just say, oh yeah, match me with someone, see what happens. And they matched me with her, and we have become friends. She's amazing because, when I did the book, I'm like, oh my God, I don't know which artist I'm going to get. I gave so many reference photos. I'm like, you have to make it look Ukrainian. It can't look Polish or Russian or Belarus, or it has its own look. Like, so the clothing has to look this way and this and that. So I had like 10 reference pictures for every illustration, the poor girl. So I'm like, this is what it looks like. But she knew it because she's Slovenian. She's like, oh yeah, I know what Ukrainian stuff looks like, because she's a neighbor, right? So she was able to just like whip it out, and she didn't need all those reference pictures, but I was so anal about it. Like, I was like, the last thing I want is like something to look not Ukrainian when it's about a book about Ukrainian magic. So I was like, I had these like mood boards, tons of mood boards for every picture. It was a little cuckoo, but that really, it resulted in these amazing, again, I'm going to give you a little sneaky peek. In each chapter, Oh my gosh, here we go. In each chapter, there's an illustration.
Oh, I think you posted that one.
Wow.
And in
Yeah,
each one, we
that's
have
gorgeous.
like directions on how to do things. Let me show you one like here. Oh yeah, like when we have directions on how to make a motanka, which is the poppet. There's an hand-drawn illustration showing you how.
Wow.
So she does, I mean, there's like 50 illustrations in here. She did amazing. So anything that's showing you directions, plus each chapter starts, I wanted it to be like a fairy tale, magical fairy tale book, right? So we had to have an illustration on every chapter. And I was pushy for it. I was
That's
like, no,
amazing.
we have to have this many illustrations. So we have these gorgeous 2-color, old school, like an old fairy tale book where there's a 2-color illustration at the beginning of each chapter to give you a flavor, right? You know, so
Wow,
it
that's
was
amazing. What's her
it
name
was
again?
Sarah Concilia. I can't say her last name because it's got letters in it that are not.
I'll
It's
add it to the show notes.
Concilia, I think it is how you pronounce it. I'm probably mangling it terribly. But if her Instagram, you can find her on Instagram. It's Yaga Sara, YAGASARA is her Instagram account.
And
I'm
she
gonna have
even
to
had
ask her.
Yaga in the name. There
Yeah,
you go.
she's a Baba Yaga devotee. So I was like, oh my God, I don't even need to tell
That's
you anything.
perfect.
You know, it's like you already know. So it's like I had so much explanation because I didn't know if they were going to put me with someone who had no clue or what, but she knew all of it. So she was amazing. So we're thinking about working on another project together. She and I, we have another project in the works that's just it's like baby seed stage. So I can't talk too much about it, but we are going to work on something else together. And I'm already planning another book about something Slavic. So that's also seed stage. So it'll get
Yay.
announced soon. Yeah, there'll be more
We're
coming.
always ready for your books. And if you need a
Yeah.
blurb, just let me know.
I will. And then you get a free book. You get a free book sent to you when you blurb and you get it before everyone else. So
I would be honored to do it just to be in one of your books. So
yeah,
that would
I'll
be
hit
awesome.
you up, Mike, on the next one for sure. For sure. For sure.
And listener, if you are listening on the podcast version of this, once this is up on the YouTube channel, you're going to need to check it out because we just got a sneak peek into Baba Yaga's Book of Witchcraft, some of the artwork. Check out that artist that was just mentioned on Instagram.
Yaga Sara. And also too, if you want people who want a sneak peek, you can look at the introduction in chapter 1 for free. So if you go to my website, I have a link that goes directly to the page where you can see it. It's called Baba Yaga's Book of Witchcraft.com. If you go on that URL, it will take you to the page where I'm doing a thing about pre-orders right now. If they do a pre-order of the book before it comes out, which I don't know if it's going to when this is coming out, but they get a free class and they get a free book release party pass, VIP pass to the book release party if you pre-order it. But on that page is also a link that you can look at the first chapter of the book, which is all about talismanic embroidery. So you can get a real feeling for the book by looking at that first chapter and see if it's for you, you know. And I think that's a great way to sort of rather than just like, you know, how sometimes Amazon and these places will let you look at this page or that page or the other page. You need to have a continuity and see a whole chapter to really know. And this is a way of getting that peek at that book like you would be at a bookstore. You know, you look at the book and you kind of read a little bit to see if it's your jam, right? So this is a way you can do that. So you can go to Baba Yaga's Book of Witchcraft.com and get that sneak peek.
Awesome. Well, you heard it there. And do you want to give out your website and Instagrams and all that good stuff?
Yeah. So people can find me. My website is Parlor of Wonders. It's PARLOUR because I'm very fancy. I like to say parlorofwonders.com is my website. They can find me there. They can find my shop there. There's tons and tons and tons of free resources on that site too. I've got lots of learning resources, how-to guides, how to work with oils, how to work with mojo bags, how to work with bath crystals, all that kind of stuff. I also
join her spell squad.
Yeah, you can join my spell squad. Every Sunday I give a free, I record a podcast episode and then I do a live Q&A with people where they can ask any question about magic and I answer them. So that happens on Sundays at 5 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Central, 7 p.m. Mountain, 8 p.m. Eastern time. And then what else do I have? I've got YouTube videos up. If you look up Madame Pamita on YouTube, you'll find my channel. I've got tons and tons of videos there. I've got a very active Instagram, as we mentioned early in our podcast today, talking about Instagram. I'm active on there, and you can find me at Madame Pamita, all one word, no spaces, no dots, no numbers, no extra letters. Those are all my lovely copycats that are trying to rip you off and do all kinds of nasty things. I have to say one thing. If you ever end up in this situation, this is a great strategy. I make a post about the copycat people, and then I put it in my stories, and then I put it in my highlights. So you can always look on my highlights, and there's a thing called scammers, and it's like the hall of shame of scammers, so that you can always see, like, wait, did Madame Pamita open up a second account? Oh, wait, no, here's the scammer right here. So it teaches people, educates people on how to spot those scammers. I will, as everyone says, I will never DM you and say, hey, Grand Rising, I feel like you need a reading. Send me some money. I never do that, you know.
Rania, I'll tell you this really fast before we cut this off, but I just messaged her the other day and I was like, you're not going to believe this, but I just got this DM on Instagram and it was like, hey, how are you? From Madame Pamita. And I was like, weird. So I said something back, and I knew right away that it was a scammer. And I was like, hey, by the way, you've been reported and I'm about to block you. So, and they were like, no, don't. This is my second account. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, I'll go to the message feed that we've been chatting on and I'll just ask you there. And if you respond, then we're good. Immediately blocked me.
Exactly.
I know.
Yeah.
I sent it to her. She's like, yeah, I'll add it to my scammers list. And I'm like, you have a scammers list. That's awesome.
Scammers list.
Yeah, that's what you have to do. I mean, it's the Instagram's so terrible. I think Teresa Reed, the tarot lady, she discovered that if you go for copyright infringement, they'll take it down, but it's like a long process. And I'm like, I don't have time for that. So I have to sit down and do it. Maybe I'll do that this weekend. I don't know. But yeah. So that's the yeah. So that's how you handle it. So anyway, on Instagram, it's all Madame Pamita spelled just like you think it's spelled, and no spaces, no extra letters, no numbers, none of that stuff. The only second account I have Parlor of Wonders, which is my business account. So that's about, like, we have sales on there and like specials. I mean, it's a really great account to follow, but that's my second account, but it's my business account. So I have my personal account, my business account. So that's where you'll find me. No extra accounts or any of that stuff. And I will never, ever, 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 ever go into your messages. I may go into your messages and say, oh my gosh, I love your post, or thank you for that message, or something like that. But I'll never ask you for anything because I have my website. If you want to interact with me, go to my website. That's the safe way to go. I once had this guy, I know we're going on a tangent here, but I once had this guy go, where's my spell? I'm like, what spell? I'm like, he's like, you WhatsApped me. I go, I didn't WhatsApp you. He had sent gift cards to some scammer and who was pretending to be me, and then was contacting me about the spell. I said but he had contacted me earlier and said, I want you to do a spell for me. I said, yeah, go to my website, go to Parlor of Wonders, and you can order one. But he didn't do that. He went with the scammer, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I feel so terrible for you. I'm so sorry. But I told you, go to my website. Like, listen, exactly. Follow directions. This is the one place where I will be follow directions. Don't.
Now, are you verified on Instagram?
No, and I keep trying and I keep hitting it and trying. One day.
Nowhere near as
bigger than me. That don't have verification. Llewellyn my book publisher is trying to get verification. They're a freaking book publisher.
Llewellyn isn't verified?
Yes, and they can't get it. And I'm like, are you kidding me?
That's crazy. Well, anyway. You heard it here. There's only one Madame Pamita, so check her out. And definitely we're going to try to put our heads together and have her back on. And also, you've heard all of her stuff. You know Son of a Witch because you're listening to it. So definitely hit Madame Pamita up. Let her know how much you loved this episode. And definitely check out her new book, Baba Yaga's Book of Witchcraft. Rania, do you have any closing words, my dear?
I'm just very excited to get to read that book, the new one, and see all the correspondence and the similarities.
I just love learning folk magic from other cultures and learning, when we see and discover these things, you're gonna, I would say last thing I would say is, like, Slavic magic, in my opinion, is not a closed practice. Anyone can participate and join and honor it and take what works for them and so on. That's how I really do feel about it. And I love learning as I look at the old beautiful folk magic practices of so many cultures. You see we're more alike than we are different. That's what we see, which is so beautiful, right?
Absolutely. And that's what it's all about. So,
absolutely.
Well, thanks for tuning in, everybody. I really appreciate you listening, and I hope you enjoyed this. Check out Madame Pamita, check out the new book, and we will talk to you next time.